Support for Louisiana, the state we're in, is provided by...
Every day, I go to work for Entergy.
I know customers are counting on me.
So Entergy is investing millions of dollars
to keep the lights on
and installing new technology
to prevent outages before they happen.
Together,
we power life.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.
Both a good time and a bad time for offshore wind.
New activity in the Gulf of Mexico and what that means for Louisiana.
19,000 kids were once registered and now they're missing.
Louisiana's truancy rate tops the national average.
In order to be productive citizens, we also need to be healthy, and so the state will need to spend some time focusing on that going forward.
The state of Louisiana's health.
I want his story to be seen and heard.
A long-lost legend resurfacing nearly 40 years later.
New information on the Madison Brooks tragedy that occurred on January 15th. The 17-year-old charged with first and third-degree rape will be tried as an adult, along with 3 other suspects, 2 who are 18 years old and 1 who was 28.
Of course, alcohol has been at the center of the horrible events that ultimately took the life of the LSU co-ed that evening. Her blood alcohol level was nearly 4 times the legal limit.
And now to other news making headlines across the state.
LSU Tigers' leading wide receiver is no longer facing misdemeanor charges for carrying an illegal weapon. 19-year-old Malik Neighbors was approached by police officers Monday in New Orleans during a Mardi Gras parade when they spotted an L-shaped object in his pocket. Neighbors was arrested when he told the officers he did not have a permit. The charges were dropped Wednesday afternoon on the condition that his gun not be returned to him. This carnival season ended in tragedy for some, leaving 1 teenager dead and a 4-year-old injured. Police responded to gunfire on a popular parade route late Monday, eventually taking a 21-year-old into custody. The police superintendent says 2 guns were recovered from the scene. The man in custody was charged for illegally carrying a weapon and now second-degree murder. Homicide investigators are looking for any information and trying to identify a motive. They're also investigating whether another shooter was involved. Governor John Bel Edwards' budget was presented to lawmakers this week. His proposal emphasizes teacher pay raises, transportation projects, and funding for education. About $45.7 billion will go toward this year's spending plan, which is a little less than last year's $46.1 billion. The governor also wants to set aside money for FEMA repayments for hurricane damage, updating Louisiana's voting systems, and repair funding for state buildings. This will be the governor's last budget proposal. He will not be able to run for governor again, as he's reached the term limit. Lawmakers will convene April 10th when session begins to vote on the spending plan.
There is action happening in the Gulf of Mexico on offshore rigs with drilling on federal waters, opening the waters for more oil and gas drilling. But then Wednesday, news of the first offshore wind auction took place. There was going to be a delay on that, we had heard. So to explain all this change is now Professor Emeritus of the LSU Center for Energy Studies, David Dismukes. Welcome. Thanks for being here. First, what do you make of the oil and gas drilling?
Well, it's positive news. As you know, there's been a stall throughout most of this administration on new activity. So for us, it helps put people back to work. It creates new jobs. But it also, continues a revenue source of generation. A lot of the dollars that we get through Go Mesa and other funding sources from the federal government go into environmental and coastal restoration projects. So those are important things that have been at a loss for us during that delay, and it looks like those are picking up.
And did the light maybe turn on with the reality of the war in Ukraine and that if the U.S. is not producing this, the other people who are not the ones you want to be producing it.
Right. It's hard to know what the entire motivation is on that. You'd hope that would be part of it. I think part of it had to do with some of the quid pro quos that were traded off during the Inflation Reduction Act passage.
Yeah.
And probably some of this litigation probably doesn't help matters, at least for the administration from that perspective. So I'm sure some light bulb went off. It may have been a combination of them, but for us, it's a good outcome.
And a compromise, it seems anyway, and it's very good for Louisiana.
It is, and
in the U.S.
It is, and I think and as you mentioned before, it's very good timing, not only because of the war that's going on in Eastern Europe right now, but a lot of major energy companies, as they've set out their capital budgeting plans for the next year, the next 2 years, I think Exxon has done this, Shell, maybe BP as well, they've all talked about increasing investment in opportunities in the Gulf of Mexico. Right. It's an area where they want to earmark that in kind of backing away after getting burned on some of these write-downs that they've had in Eastern Europe and in Russia in particular, bringing those kind of back home to more stable environments. So it's a good timing for us. Hopefully it'll carry through. There won't be delays. There won't be lawsuits. The environmental review process won't be unnecessarily long. So we'll just have to see how it all plays out.
With the fast track of this new oil and gas drilling, there was said to be a delay in the wind energy, but that's not happened this week because the auction, they've already begun that process now.
Yeah, it was a big surprise seeing that this morning or today. We'll see where that goes. There are 3 blocks, I believe, that are going to be up. 1 offshore from Lake Charles and then 2 off of Galveston.
Right. Mm-hmm. Same places that we had seen before.
Right. So it's a unique opportunity to be first to the Gulf. It's kind of a mixed bag right now. It's both a good time and a bad time for offshore wind. There have been a lot of challenges in the industry right now, particularly with projects along the eastern seaboard and just big capital projects in general. As you can imagine, when you've got really high interest rates and higher cost of financing, and the uncertainty of that with not knowing where the Federal Reserve is going to go. I mean, you watch the stock market the last few days, and I think we're going to continue to see that kind of volatility. It creates a big macroeconomic overhang on big projects like this. But it's very encouraging to see that moving. The public sale notice has gone out. I think they're going to be offering comments on that. I think the administration, from what it appears, is going to be looking at tying some provisions, particularly with local content and other things, into the sale. So we'll just have to see how that plays out.
The building time of getting construction, the erection of these very tall turbines, which I didn't realize some of them are 750 feet tall. So these are huge structures in the Gulf, but before that would be even operating to help with energy. Is that years away?
Yeah, it's going to probably be some years away. A lot of developers are prioritizing the projects that are on the eastern seaboard. It'll be interesting to see what this interest is. It's a bit of a mixed bag. New York just had an open solicitation the last several months, and it had pretty good response rate despite the fact that we've got these challenges. It'll be interesting to see how this one comes out, how what the royalty payments are going to be on the leases themselves. A lot of those Atlantic seaboard leases went for considerable amounts of money. Yeah. So it's a big investment you don't want to leave sitting around and not operating on. But these are unique structures, as you've noted. High technology, handful of people that make these things. Yeah. And they lend themselves even more than, say, normal manufacturing activities to supply chain challenges. And we're already starting to see that with some of the developments right now. So again, it's kind of a mixed bag right now. We'll just have to see how it all plays out.
All right, and at least there's been some harmony on both sides and maybe a compromise. So both will move forward, but it's a good thing that the oil and gas is too for us.
Yep, it's good for us. It's good for labor force development in Louisiana and really continuing that, moving on in this next era with offshore wind.
David, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
A new study by the Associated Press and Stanford University found that about 19,000 Louisiana students are unaccounted for on the education map. These absences cannot be explained. Most of the missing kids account for about 2% of the total population of school-age children in the state. Roxson Welch with the Family and Youth Service Center has been sounding the alarm for months. So recently there was a study released by Stanford University and the Associated Press that said that 19,000 kids were missing in Louisiana off the educational map. So when you hear something like that, it sounds like a really loaded sentence, 19,000 kids missing from Louisiana schools. But what does that actually mean?
It's horrifying to me because, first of all, 19,000 children have no options in life, period. They don't have an education, and they also don't have somebody to watch to see if something's going on. So school serves a lot of purposes, and so they don't have that anymore. But that means 19,000 kids were once registered, and now they're missing. But what about the ones who were never registered to begin with?
So you're saying you think the number is much larger?
Oh, I'm certain that the number is much larger because we have people who will call us and tell us about children that are in their house, that they've never seen anybody anywhere around going to school. And so the neighbors are concerned. Grandmothers are concerned because their grandchildren have not been in school. You've got the police that'll pick up a child and the child will tell them, you know, I want to go to school. I'm not allowed to go to school because I live with my grandmother and she can't sign the papers, things like that. Lots of different reasons, and those kids are not on the radar screen. Those kids are not listed as the 19,000 because they were never registered to begin with.
So for the kids, the 19,000 that are listed, I mean, in your experience, why aren't they coming to school? Because the study says that there's really no data showing why.
From experience, I can tell you why. And really, it's common sense why. First of all, you have the problem that you have family issues, and family issues by themselves will cause all kinds of trouble. And I was an educator for a very long time, and I knew when the children were very young, second and third grade usually, because in second and third grade, that's when the kids require help from home.
Right.
And so if they're not getting the help from home, then you start seeing that the papers are not checked and the papers are not sent back signed, and the child starts struggling with school, and the child starts not wanting to come to school. Mm-hmm. And the mama is sleeping, or the mama's working double shifts, mom's doing the best she can, child's not coming to school.
So there's a lot of different reasons. It's not just, you know, a neglectful parent. There could be
There's all kinds of reasons. It could be a grandmother that's raising the child and she's ill and she's doing the best she can. You really have to look at these things one at a time. Every single case that we've ever seen is different because the circumstances are different, the children are different, the parents are different, the family's different, the system is different for that particular child. And so you really have to pay attention to these kind of things. Why? Because kids, it's their nature to want to learn. It's all of our nature to want to learn. And so there's got to be a reason. Now, sometimes it's because you're so far behind that you really just honestly don't want to be there anymore because it's embarrassing. And you're all of a sudden in a foreign land with foreign language, with people you don't know, with people who are critical because you don't know. And right now we've got COVID that changed the entire landscape. So we've got kids who have missed 3 years of school, plus half of the year of the COVID, because the kids, that hit around March. And so what happens in school is for the first part of school, they're teaching them skills, and in about March and April, they start bringing them all together, and they're connecting those skills.
Right. There's no connection now because
there was
they've
no
not
connection.
been there.
So you missed that year too. 4 years. And then the following year, they tried so hard to get the kids set up on Zoom and Google Classroom so the kids could go on to these classrooms and virtually. So they had to get the children computers. They had to get the children hotspots. They had to do all of these things. It was a very difficult task. And so some of the kids didn't get the computers at all until well into the next year. So you've got that. And if you are suddenly zapped into a foreign country with foreign language, with everything different, would you want to go to school when every single time you opened your mouth you were wrong? They stop wanting to go to school. And then they become very angry children because they did want to go to school, and things got in their way. And so you become very angry, and then at a certain point you just become angry people because options have been removed. If you don't have school, your options are very limited in life, and people are going to survive. So it's a big problem for all of us.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this really serious issue. I mean, the report was very shocking for a lot of people, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
The health of Louisiana citizens is in flux, like most of the country. Our residents are experiencing shorter lifespans and bouts of poor mental health episodes. Allison Plyer with the National Conference on Citizenship shed some light on why Louisiana ranks so low. Thank you so much for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So these numbers are pretty shocking whenever you look at them at first. So let's start with the life expectancy. So Louisiana has the third shortest life expectancy among Americans.
Right.
Why is that?
Well, it's particularly bad news because obviously life expectancy in the U.S. fell in the first year of COVID. And unlike other developed countries who were able to turn that around and increase their life expectancy the second year, ours continued to fall. And Louisiana is, as you said, the third lowest life expectancy. There's a number of things that came along with COVID in addition to 18,000 people dying in Louisiana from COVID. We've seen drug overdoses skyrocket by 30%, and Louisiana has a higher than average rate of drug overdose deaths now. Also, gun suicides, which are the majority of ways that guns actually cause death, are suicides, sadly. And Louisiana also is higher than the national average, and those skyrocketed about 10%. We've also seen increased traffic fatalities. So there's, obviously the mental health issues that you mentioned are a big component of these increasing deaths.
Right, and I mean, you would think, 3 years after the pandemic, we would see some sort of improvement, but I'm looking at the mental health numbers and it says 40% of Louisianians report symptoms of anxiety or depression. I mean, why are we not seeing any of those improvements?
Yeah, and that was as recently as December of 2022, right? So just a couple months ago. And that's only among adults. And obviously there's mental health issues that teenagers and young people are experiencing as well. Louisiana has had some of the most severe, of course, disasters in the last 3 years, which have compounded the stress of the COVID crises, right? Louisiana parishes, every single one has had at least 12 disaster declarations in the same time frame that we've had COVID going on. So that causes a lot of anxiety and depression. And then we've had power outages. We've had, more hours of power outages across the state than any other state in the nation over the last 10 years. So, if our infrastructure were more resilient, and we could be more resilient in the face of these disasters, that would help a lot.
And then, of course, there's long COVID.
That's right, yeah. And currently, 31% of Louisianans who have experienced COVID say they're experiencing long COVID, which can be really debilitating. For some folks, it means they just can't even go to work. So nationwide, long COVID is going to continue to be an issue, and doctors are saying there's not enough research about how to treat it, which is a problem, right? If doctors don't know how to help you get better, then these are symptoms that people can really struggle with for a long time.
Now, you're a researcher, which means you look at data like this all the time. Have you ever seen, ranks and scores this low before?
Well, sadly, Louisiana often ranks very low in the nation. But I think what's really concerning is that the nation is ranking so low in many of these. Life expectancy has not turned around in the last year and a half as it has for other wealthy countries. The thing about gun suicides, for example, is about 3 times as high in the U.S. as it is in other countries. Also, pregnancy-related deaths in the U.S. are twice as high as they are in other wealthy countries. And in Louisiana, they're 3 times as high as they are in the U.S., right? So Louisiana often is at the bottom of rankings, but the U.S. itself is not doing well on health measures compared to other wealthy nations.
Do you see this improving anytime soon? I mean, it's been nearly 3 years, almost, since the pandemic hit and we went on lockdown. But
these numbers have been lingering, and it seems like they've been getting worse. I mean, do you see this improving anytime soon?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of sort of opportunities and challenges ahead, right? Speaking of infrastructure, we know there's a lot of funding coming from the federal government to strengthen infrastructure, and that'll be going over probably a decade. The state can do a lot to improve health and mental health. One thing we know is that states that don't have paid sick leave, that there are more people, because of the stress of not being able to take off work and be paid, actually have mental health crises, there's more gun suicide, more overdose deaths. And so states can actually help by saying, hey, we need to have paid sick leave, or at least let localities pass ordinances to require paid sick leave in their jurisdictions.
All right, so is there anything else about the study that stuck out to you? Anything that people should know?
I think that, the next many years are going to be really important ones for building the health of our communities, right, to come out of this. In order to be productive citizens, we also need to be healthy. And so the state will need to spend some time focusing on that going forward.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We appreciate having you in.
Thank you.
And now a story about a legend from the past, a man who was in the first class of LPB's Louisiana Legends, Baton Rouge native Gene Callahan. Big name in the television and film industry, a two-time Oscar winner in set design, art direction. He told the LA Times in an interview it was his job to get the right look and feel for a show, from locations and interiors. Memories of Callahan came rushing back for us this week when a Baton Rouge woman walked into our studios saying that she had this amazing memorabilia that was his, apparently left behind in the house that he grew up in, and she inherited it. That's where our story begins.
I want his story to be seen and heard.
The story Gina Gaspard of Baton Rouge wants to be seen and heard is captured in a gold mine of American television and film history. It belonged to Gene Callahan, a Baton Rouge native and one of Hollywood's most accomplished art directors and production and set designers of all time. He twice won Academy Awards out of 4 nominations.
I left Louisiana 43 years ago. Not to escape, but to seek a career that seemed impossible to pursue here.
A belated thank you, Barbra Streisand. He did Funny Girl.
There are personal notes like that one from Barbra Streisand and letters, dozens and dozens of them, and hundreds of photographs as Callahan worked to get the right look and feel for a movie set. A time capsule of TV and film history left behind in these boxes. So how did Gina, a complete stranger, come to own Callahan's memorabilia? 1951 Wisteria Avenue in Baton Rouge's Garden District is the house where Gene Callahan grew up and lived until after he left LSU and Louisiana and began his career. Gina rented that house in 1995, several years after his death.
You are not a relative.
I am not a relative.
You had never met Gene Callahan.
Gene.
How did you ever come to possess these treasures?
I was living in his house, renting it, and the bank called. I knew it was going to be, they were going to sell it. And they said, if you want anything in there, take it, because we're coming tomorrow with a truck and everything in there is going to the dump. So I thought maybe there's a headboard back there,
right,
some piece of furniture, a lamp, something like that. And on the way out, I saw this, the Oscar.
Actually, the Oscar nomination plaque Callahan received in the art direction category from 1964. It's for the film America, America, directed by the great Elia Kazan. It won Callahan his second Oscar. He won his first 2 years earlier for The Hustler with Paul Newman. Among the findings, photos of Natalie Wood, who starred in Splendor in the Grass with a then unknown Warren Beatty.
I'm awful glad to see you again. Thanks, Bud.
Callahan was one of LPB's first Louisiana legends. This is from his acceptance in 1990, in which he speaks almost prophetically about Louisiana's film industry.
My work in film has taken me to cities all over the world, and it gave me a truly wonderful and exciting life. While I was away, I convinced several producers, including the irascible Otto Preminger, that they could make their films here in Louisiana. They, in turn, sang our praises to other producers, which possibly may have encouraged others to come here. Louisiana has so much to offer. It has greatly varied geography, has lovely modern cities, small picturesque towns and villages and exotic swamps, bayous, vast plains and rolling hills, and well-maintained historical sites. To this we can add skilled labor who will help the producers and filmmakers capture Louisiana on film. And finally, we add our legendary hospitality, which has seduced every company that I know that has worked here. I have now finally retired to Baton Rouge. Though it was said that you can't go home again, they were wrong. I am home, and maybe I never really left.
Callahan was so genuine and unaffected by his fame, loved by so many people that I've talked with this week who knew him.
Yeah, and I think it's amazing that she was able to find all of this stuff just sitting in her house.
Yeah, it was in the back of the house.
So there's much more about Callahan in our Louisiana Digital Archives website at ladigitalmedia.org.
That's right. You can learn about his life for this generation. And everyone, that is our show for this week. Remember, you can watch anything LPB anytime, wherever you are, with our LPB Anytime app.
You can catch LPB news and public affairs shows, as well as other Louisiana programs you've come to enjoy over the years. And please like us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
For everyone at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Andre Moreau.
And I'm Kara St. Cyr.
Until next time, that's the state we're in.
Every day, I go to work for Entergy.
I know customers are counting on me.
So Entergy is investing millions of dollars to keep the lights on and installing new technology
to prevent outages before they happen.
Together. Together.
Together.
We power life.
Additional support provided by the Fred B. and Ruth B. Ziegler Foundation and the Ziegler Art Museum located in Jennings City Hall. The museum focuses on emerging Louisiana artists and is an historical and cultural center for Southwest Louisiana. And the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting, with support from viewers like you.